Thank you, everyone, and it's lovely to be here to talk to you about some of the work that we're doing in Tayside to really think about some of these issues that Morag so challengingly described, I think. I talk about poverty most days in my work, but actually when you hear some of those stark figures, it actually really brings it home. And I think for us in Tayside, supported by the Robertson Trust, we're really trying to think about how can we tackle those systems? What can we do locally to try and challenge some of these experiences and practices that families experience on a day-to-day basis? I'm joined by my colleague Richard Lister, who's one of our Financial Wellbeing Coordinators. We also have Frances Harvey, who sadly can't be with us today, who are doing a lot of great work across the 3 local authorities within Tayside. So I want to tell you a little bit about that work today, but more specifically focusing on some of the work that we're doing around debt. I think it's really important to kind of land this work around kind of children's services in the widest context. Some of you may be aware of the work that's happening around the Promise, where we're really thinking about how can we better support the whole needs of families and trying to prevent children from coming into care and actually knowing that the best place for children to grow up is within their home. I think what we're increasingly seeing, though, is the impact that poverty have on children on a daily basis. We've got more, if you're living in poverty, you're more likely to be placed on the Child Protection Register, you're more likely to come into care. And as part of our work, we're looking at, well, how can we try and prevent that and see poverty as not something that just sits on the side, but something that's actually deep-rooted and massively impacts on families' experiences on a day-to-day basis. So we've been really fortunate to be funded by the Robertson Trust to look at doing some systems change work around poverty and the cost of living. The beginning of this project, though, really stemmed from some additional funding that we got from the Cora Foundation, which is about supporting us through a focus on debt for families. So we have £50,000 from Cora. Aberlour have matched that fund, and we'll be using some of the funding from the Robertson Trust to really think about how can we best support families who are struggling with those very real and live data. I think that Morag presented. We have families that are experiencing that on a daily basis. Cost of living is really challenging, but when you have those ongoing and enduring debts, we wanted to look at how can we support families in a way to try and tackle some of those debt issues and enable them to be better supported with some of the other range of challenges that they have within their lives. So one of the areas was a kind of test of change that we wanted to do, and we wanted to think about if we actually lead with supporting families around poverty, addressing the debt, does that better enable them to engage with supports that we're able to offer to kind of help them with some of the other challenges that are around within their lives. We also want to work very, very closely with our local authority partners and third sector partners to think about, can we do this differently? Can we support families in a different way to really think about how we better support their needs? So some of the work that we're doing, and we're working very, very closely with partners across the kind of mental welfare context within welfare rights, context across the local authorities, but also with other organisations and agencies to think about, can we do this differently? Are there things that we can do to kind of test and challenge and really put families at the centre rather than systems at the centre? So one of the aspects of the work that we're doing is for families that we're supporting. So we have a range of family support services across Tayside, and we're with those families that we're supporting, our practitioners are engaging with families and helping them talk about their financial circumstances. Now that's something that isn't always easy. Families aren't always ready to talk about their financial challenges, and we've had to look at how we best support our staff as well to help them feel confident and have the skills to talk about finances with families, really equipping them with knowledge and connections and contacts to support families around that. But one of the things that we do is we work very closely with our partners, our welfare rights colleagues, to work with families to say, have you got enduring debt? Are there financial issues and challenges within your life? And how can we best support them with you? And the premise being that if we can resolve some of those issues, will that make a difference to families? Will that better support them to be able to address some of the other challenges that they have? So I'm not going to talk about the kind of wider systems change work that we're doing today, but really focusing on that debt work. So far, the first year of the project, we've been able to support 14 families to have their debts cleared. So families are referred in, we work with welfare rights, and it can be quite a lengthy process to identify what the debts are that families have. Families don't always know. But what we've, as I say, you can see here, 14 approved applications. Quite a number currently are kind of being supported and being assessed through the system. And we've managed to pay off, as you can see there, over £38,000 of debt for 14 families at the moment, with a total of 51 people within those families. What you can see is the issues, and I think this echoes with the research that MORAG has undertaken. Poverty clearly a factor for families, but mental health issues, unemployment, changes in family circumstances. I think that's something that we've seen particularly post-pandemic, that families who had been working previously were managing and getting by, suddenly find themselves in very different circumstances. Single parents were predominantly kind of a factor. We've got, half of the families are single parent families, and women being the kind of main kind of carers around within families that we've been supporting. But you'll see there disabilities, range of other issues, and that, when you think about them, these are just not issues that are on a chart. These are actually very difficult experiences and challenges that families face on a daily basis. And we come to thinking about, well, what will the debt be? And actually, one of the things that I think has been quite interesting in doing this work is actually thinking about people's judgments around families and that kind of value base of, actually, if people manage their money better, then it would be okay. They need to be better at budgeting. I've heard that a number of times. And certainly what I'm finding out is that actually the families that we're supporting could teach me a thing or two about how to manage money. Experts in managing their budgets, because they have to be, because they don't have the choices that perhaps some other people have. But what we did find was that the vast proportion of the debt that we're paying off is public debt. So we've paid off around about £33,000. 86% of the fund that was spent so far is public debt, council tax and rent arrears, which is actually pretty stark. I think if you look down here as well, there are other, we have paid off a bit of credit card debt for people. We have paid off a car loan for someone whose circumstances suddenly changed and they weren't able to then continue to pay the debt that they had. But really significantly for me is that 86% figure. So for us, what we're really keen to do, and we haven't achieved it yet, I'm really interested to read about the Gateshead project, but actually, can we do something differently around public debt as a test to change? If any of you are out there from our Tayside local authorities, we're really very, very keen to do some work around this. Is there something that we can do to see what difference that will make to families? Because it seems to me that this is crazy, that we actually have to do something incredibly different to try and tackle this and support families. So what we've learned so far is actually there's a really good commitment across the partnership to tackle this. I think colleagues, and I see a colleague up in the back there from Dundee Welfare Rights, they're very aware of these difficult complexities and challenges, but there are there's a lot of competing demands on the system as well, and the pressures around various responsibilities and tasks and requirements that are out there, so it's difficult, and the systems are incredibly complex. I think it's important to kind of say that, post-pandemic as well, there are other challenges around there, but for us, let's see what we can do around debt, let's see what we can do around public debt. But the willingness is there, but the internal systems are incredibly complex, and how do we get talk to the right people in the local authorities to start this dialogue? And that's certainly something that myself and Richard and Francis feel very passionate about, and think about how can we try and take this forward and see if we can make some small inroads, as well as the work that we're doing nationally to kind of strike the mark. From families, we know that there's actually a lot of stigma about talking about money and about debt in particular. It's not always the easiest conversations, and for some families, it's not the right time for them. There's maybe too many other pressures going on that they don't want to talk about their finances, they don't want to talk about their financial hardship. So it's about that relationship approach. We work very closely with families, and we have a very relational-based approach, and it is about finding that right time when it's okay for families to support them through this. And I think, that stigma is very, very difficult. And I think many don't know how to start. They don't know how much debt they owe. it's a very, very complex system. And I think when we find them, when families have been referred and we're working with our welfare rights colleagues, it can be very, very difficult to know exactly what the extent of the debt is because the systems are so complex. And for families, for us as practitioners, that's overwhelming. For families, it's even more so. I think one of the things that's really important for us is to say, what has the impact of this been? What does it feel like when you're living with that significant amount of debt? And I think you can see the comments that are up here. I felt like there was a noose around my neck. Very powerful to think about how overwhelming it feels. Weighty, it felt like the debt situation was impacting on me daily. Debt and rent arrears, making people feel down, always a worry, not knowing what to do, this constant pressure of this significant debt that's hanging over a family's head whilst you're trying to deal with the whole other range of issues. And if we think about some of those factors that present around domestic abuse, mental health issues, children with disabilities, that's a kind of common feature as well that we see with families really struggling to manage the kind of daily challenges of family life. But you also have this debt hanging over your head, threatening letters being sent through the door. Very, very difficult. However, what we have found is the significant impact that this £38,000 is that we've paid so far has had on those 14 families. You know, practical situations like someone's housing situation improved. Families that are now on the list, they can be moved because the rent arrears prevented them from moving out of very inappropriate housing. So we're seeing that with now families are seen as a priority. Funnily, they weren't a priority previously because they had some long-standing rent arrears that were there, but the system now sees them as a priority and they can be moved on. People talking about being able to face the other issues that are around within their lives. When the debt was hanging around for one family, they spoke about, actually, this is with me constantly. I couldn't face anything else. But actually, that element being dealt with, being cleared, knowing there was not going to be those threatening letters coming through the door, actually enables families to say, I can deal with this. I can face some of the other challenges that are around within my life. I can do this. We've got it. And we're very supported by our staff alongside them, helping them make those changes. It's not going to wipe everything out for families, but it definitely makes them feel like they can move forward. So I'm going to close my input here, and I'm going to invite Richard and Dean to come up to the table. I don't know if you want to have a wee seat up here. Dean is really, we're really fortunate to have Dean come and tell us his story and the experience of what living in difficult financial circumstances has for him. So if I'd like to welcome them both up to the stage. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Richard Lister. I'm one of the Financial Wellbeing Coordinators that Dawn was just mentioning there through the course of the talk. So yeah, we've got a wee bit of an interview between myself and Dean here. Now this is something that I have shamelessly stolen from the Robertson Trust. There was an event I was at that they did this last year and it worked very well. So it's a wee bit awkward that there's somebody here from the Robertson Trust. But consider this a homage rather than theft. So we have, we're very fortunate to have Dean along with us today, who has a lot of experience, unfortunately, through some of the stuff that Dawn highlighted and that Professor Traynor highlighted. So Dean's got some thoughts, we've got some questions that we're going to go through and get Dean's experiences and everything. So yeah, so thank you very much, Dean, for coming along today. So first of all, really, can you just tell us about your main source of income?
Is it? Okay. My main source, that's my disability. That'll be my disability and my ESA. That's my two. I'm severely disabled, on a range of medication. So, yeah, that's I'm a single dad, 6 years now. My son's 15.
Yeah.
visits a week. So, yeah. So on top of stress, trying to live, trying to cope as a single dad. Currently homeless through a no-fault eviction. Staying with my mum.
Yeah. What is it like? What's it like being in debt? Can you describe a wee bit about how that feels and the sort of impact?
Oh, for me, I mean, it keeps me awake. It's just mounting up and mounting up. It's never ending. Trying to keep my son's mental health at a level as hard. Trying to keep hide him for the pressures of day-to-day living and still sort of keep up a normal life, if you like. So, yeah, it's a day-to-day struggle. You've got to constantly hide things for them. You can't let them see things. So,
You mentioned there about experiencing, homelessness, and I know from our discussions that it's a very kind of particular reason that has led to this. Can you just tell the group a wee bit about how that's actually happened?
when I first got my son, his mother took the drugs, so where I was staying, there was a lot of bother, so I had to move. So I was waiting on a council house for so long. Then I decided to go with a Home Finders, which is a private let company through Dundee City Council. Eventually found a house that I thought that was going to be fine, so I moved into the house on the 18th of November 2020, and then on the 12th of December they come up and said I had to move out. It was a legal eviction. I was kept there for 2 years. The landlord never turned up at court, The council were aware that I was going to be homeless for 2 years. Then it was basically down to putting my son's education before housing. I was offered a house. My son's at Dundee College in the Ferry, and I got offered a house at the other side of Charleston, a one-bedroom network flat, which would financially impossible, do much of an impact on my son's career. He's just his whole life. Then I got offered a one-bedroom network flat, 13 up in the bottom of the Hull Multis. Being severely disabled, and it wouldn't be the best place to be in for his mental health. And then again, it's all temporary accommodation as well. So the sheriff's officers come up on the 10th of the 10th at 10 a.m. and that was that. Now I'm still homeless, still out there.
And what's they've said some things to you about about making yourself homeless. What was the kind of sort of phrasing that was around about that? If you remember?
It was when you're on the homelessness list, you get offered. You've got to accept what you get offered, or you get took off the list, and then that's you. So basically, if I never accepted the Charleston house or the multi, which is, they're no fit for purpose. Me and a multi is just it's impossible. And then, I mean, my son's education for a house in Charleston. It's just my son's education. My son's education comes first. So I had to come off the homelessness. Now I'm on mainstream, which could take months for us to get an actual house. But then, on the other hand, I'm quite kind of glad, because I don't think that I wouldn't be able to afford. If they offered me a house, come on, I wouldn't be able to afford to go into a house. Come on, I wouldn't be able.
Yeah, it's something that we had a wee conversation about the other day. The sort of circumstances that you've found yourself in at the moment, kind of sort of spending time living with your mum and living out of boxes. You've said so. If you were to be offered a house tomorrow, you would have to turn it down because you couldn't.
No, I couldn't. No, I mean, when I moved into the house at Cardraw Street, everyone was there, so the stuff I had before I got my son, I had to get rid of because obviously the stuff was already there. I didn't expect to be moving from there anytime soon, so I got rid of everything. So I've just got basically my son, me and my son's personal life stuff, but none that I could move into a house or there's nothing I could. There's nothing I could do. I'm trying to pay for my son's school trip. It's a ski trip to Austria. It's over £2,000 alone for that. And then you were speaking about public debt. There, before Christmas, there, I borrowed £800 to get stuff for his Christmas, and that's like I'm getting £30 a week. That they're taking that back at £120 a month. It's quite a big chunk of more money. But I suffer from CPTSD, EMPD. I've got a cage in my throat. I suffer from nerve damage and got spinal damage. So trying to keep the grip of the pain and keep the grip of my mental health and hide it from my son, which I could see it saying an effect on him now. I could see the effect on him.
You've just managed to get some support in place for your son. Can you just tell us just briefly how long that took to access the support for him?
Oh, well, my son, I got him 6.5 years ago. His mum turned to drugs. She went on hard drugs, and she abused him, broke his fingers, and she was battering him. So, so what was it? Sorry, Richard.
I was just saying how you'd requested for some support for him.
Yeah. So when I first got him, obviously he'd come from an abusive with his mum, so social work were involved from the start, but they kept trying to leave it, and I kept saying to them, no, I want you to stay, I need your help, I want your help. And then I asked for somebody for him to speak to, so, and that was when he was 12, and it was just there 7 weeks ago that he got somebody for Bernardo's. So basically he was 12 then, now he's 15, it's not going to have the same effect as what I would have done when I first asked for the help. Although I'm grateful for it, it's no.
It's not been a quick process.
No. I mean, he's at the age now. He's 15, so he's the problems have already started to manifest in him, and I see that when I speak to him about seeing his mum, because like I still want to build that bridge. He should hear his mum, but. The damage is, you could see that he's no had the support, it's been too long in coming, so.
Okay. Thanks, Dean, appreciate that. Now we're coming short of time, but just very quickly, there's been a lot in the sort of national press recently about the Scottish Child Payment. Can you just very quickly tell us your wee experience of accessing the Scottish Child Payment, please?
Well, I bled for that when it first came out with my worker, my one parent family support workers. I get good support from them and yourselves. So I applied for that when it first came out, and then I never heard nothing. Then come February, I called up to see what was wrong. I was on the phone for an hour and 40 odd minutes the first time. Eventually got through to this lady, and the lady says that it was a mistake at their end and somebody hadn't pressed the button for the payment to go through. So she said she would deal with it. Nothing happened, so 2 weeks later, another 2 hours and 10 minutes or something on the phone, got through to another guy, and he said he would deal with it. And after 2 weeks passed, nothing happened. I phoned up again 2.5 weeks ago and asked to stay on the phone while the process was done, because it was another hour and a half on the phone, which is totally soul destroying. If you've got mental health problems, it's really bad. So I asked to stay on the phone till it was actually done and pressed and put through. They apologised for the mistake, and I received the money 2 weeks ago. Which did land lucky, well, because, as I say, I'm paying for this ski trip for my son, so the money's will come in handy. That's come in handy for us spending money, but it just so happens it landed lucky for me. So.
Okay. Listen, thank you very much, Dean, for coming down here today and getting a bit of a spotlight shone on you. It's very much appreciated.
It's an experience. I wasn't looking up much because I didn't really want to.
I think if we can all just give Dean and Richard a round of applause. I think it's really always, I think always really important to hear what the actual experience is like, and I think thank you so much, Dean, for sharing your story, your experience, and I think it highlighted just how complicated the system is, and actually those complicated systems affect daily living. But really, really appreciate. What we're going to do now is I'm going to share a video with you of one of our other supported people, Caroline. It's a very poignant video. She openly shares what her experience is of living with challenges around finances and poverty. And we've been talking a lot about public debt today, but for Caroline, she's worked really hard to make sure she makes those payments. What that means for her is that there are other risks for her around how she has to manage, buy food, which means credit card debt for her. So I think whilst we might see something as a credit card debt about being a choice that someone makes, actually she's making a choice to pay her public commitments, and actually the knock-on effect for her comes in other ways. But she very poignantly shares her story with you. Thank you.
My name's Caroline. I am a single mum and have been for 13 years. 10 of those years I've been a carer to both my children who have got additional supported needs, as autism, ADHD, sensory processing, multi-language difficulties, the list goes on. Being a carer, I'm on carer's allowance and also income support. That's my main income source. I also have child tax credits, and the children have got their DLAs because of their disabilities. But that's all the source of income that comes into the house. There's not enough money coming into the house that covers the expenditure, simple as that. I did a calculation of my gas and my electric, and a year ago I was paying a direct debit of £110. That direct debit now is £190. So that's an increase of 42% roughly, just on gas and electric on its own. And then I calculated my income support and my carers allowance, and last year compared to this year it's only an increase of 3%, which is why it's very difficult to find money for anything else, whether it be treats or even just the basic, the weekly shopping. There is no money to pay for the weekly shopping. It has to go into the credit card. There's no other way of coping apart from using overdrafts and credit cards. Well, every day you've got to think what you're needing to buy. Because of the children's additional needs, their autism and their sensory, they won't eat anything off any supermarket shelf. It has to be a certain type of beans, certain type of pasta, certain flavour of tomato sauce. It has to be very specific. So I have no other choice but to go and put money, spend money for food that I know that they will eat, and it has to be put onto the credit card. I cannot go to a food bank because the food that they would be able to offer wouldn't be suitable. I also have intolerances, so I can't eat anything. I have to eat certain things. So unfortunately, I have to just keep getting by with the means I've got and using credit cards and overdrafts to the best of my ability without going overboard, just so we can live with a gas and electric and the roof over our head and having food that the kids will eat because of their sensory and autism preferences. I consider myself to be very financially savvy. I left school when I was 16, straight into local government, NHS, the local police as a civilian, office-based. I had full-time jobs, I've had mortgages, car loans, personal loans. I know how to manage these. So to go from that life to suddenly being a single parent and then a carer and realising you're having to live on a tiny little amount each week, it was difficult. It's like a shadow that's just hanging over you and you just can't get away from it. And that's a difficulty thing right now of what do I do with this £70 of shopping? Do I go into my overdraft? Do I go into my credit card? Well, I can't go into my overdraft because that's now maxed out. I'll need to stick it on my credit card. But what I've already just put on my credit card is on my credit card, and that'll be starting to gain interest. So that is hanging over me, thinking, when am I ever going to get to the end of that credit card? I might never get to the end of that credit card, but there's no other option. I have to use it. It has to be there because there's no other way of me buying the shopping. And the kids need food, and I need food. I just got to do what you got to do. Because my job is to give them what they need and to look after them to the best of my ability, which sometimes can be financially impacted because there is not enough money coming into the house to give them what they need. The days out, the experience of what they're interested in, like going to the arcade in Arbroath or going to Perth, to the shops up in Perth, all that adds up in money. And if you don't have that, then you start feeling guilty. You start feeling guilty because you can't provide for your kids. And if you can't provide for your kids, it's an awful situation. It's a roundabout. You go round and round thinking, have I got enough money to do this? But the kids need it. And you do anyway. Which means you end up, as a person, don't get what you may want. And I believe that my carer's allowance is for me to look after myself so I am able to care for my kids. But if my money is being used on gas and electric and food, how can I look after myself? Because there's no money spare or saved at all in the house, then if the washing machine was to break, it can't get fixed. The oven currently is not working properly. It's taking far too long to heat up on the hob, which is obviously causing me to spend more money on my electric, so I've stopped using the oven. So at the moment we're just using the microwave for everything. I do worry that if anything else in the house does go wrong, there is no money there to pay for it. My son, his bed broke before Christmas time, and I was very, very fortunate that I've managed to get funding through the Dundee Carers Centre Winter Assistance Scheme, and they provided me money so we can get a new mattress. The thing is, it's very difficult to find sources of information unless you're told about it. And that has been throughout my whole 10 years of being a carer, 13 years being a single mum. I have had to go hunting for the information. It's never been there. Even when the kids got their diagnosis, I had to hunt for information on support groups and this, that, the next thing. It's never given to you. And it's the same situation now. You're spending so much energy and emotion. It's tiring. You just have to get on with it. That doesn't help the mental health. That doesn't help my well-being. Worrying, sick. Can I afford it this week? But thinking, why have I got to this stage in the first place? I shouldn't be in this situation. I shouldn't be having to, something's got to give at some point in time. And it's very hard when you've got all the responsibility. It's very hard for me not to break down. The thing that's got to give, it cannot be me. I am keeping everything together. I've got to be there for the kids. There's nobody else there to look after the kids. And if you're worrying so much on how you're going to put food on the table that night, then you've missed out on what they are doing during the day. It's very, very difficult way to live. For managing debt, I think there needs to be more awareness of what resources are out there. Who's got the purse string? Who can you go to if you're needing a new mattress for your son, or I'm needing a new oven, or a washing machine, or there'll be somebody out there who something is broken right now, even a kettle, and they may not have that £20 or whatever to go to Argos or to get a new kettle. A lot of the time you just need somebody to hold your hand and do the job for you. And I may be able to do research and signposting, but sometimes I just need somebody to fill in that form for me, or somebody to pick up the phone and say, I've got a mum here that's needing a new oven, what can you offer? I need Aberlour to help me to put a name on a forum. If it wasn't for Aberlour, I wouldn't be able to have got my son's mattress through the carer centre. It needs to be a multi-agency overview of everything, of the current debt situation, how it affects an individual, how it affects the children, how it affects society. And I am part of that society who's perhaps looked down upon. We're just on benefits. We're scrounging off a estate. I am more than that. I've come from stuff and lost it. And I want to get back to being not relying on the state. I won't be in this forever. I will not be on benefits forever. This is a part of my life that I have to be on to support the kids until they are ready to go off into the world. Then I'll be able to finish off my degree and get a good job and get my life. But until that happens, I have to live on the state and have to worry about the money is not enough to cover living.
Yeah, not quite sure what to say. Very difficult stuff. I think bravery of Caroline and Dean sharing their story, talking about how difficult daily living is and how this is not a choice, and thinking about how can we do better, how can we work together more confidently, more collaboratively, but also the bottom line is, as Caroline pointedly says, she just doesn't have enough to live on. And I think I'd quite like to come up with something upbeat to say we're going to go off onto a break, but I think we just need to kind of sit in that moment and just reflect on what Caroline has shared with us and what Morag has and Dean and Richard have shared with us this morning. So I'd like you to invite you to go and have a bit of a coffee break now. We've got 10 minutes. Coffee's through in the room when you arrived in this morning, and I'm sure there'll be a little bit of a snack, but just thank you all for listening. We'll see you after the break.